What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I've got a little adventure I'm starting on finally. I've had this sitting here for quite a while and finally have some time, and I guess I've always had interest, but more interest than ever now that I'm into it. So I wanted to bring you along. What we have here is a WRL Globe Scout 680 that's been sitting in my collection for upwards of 6 months or more. And finally, I took it out of the cabinet earlier this week, and I'm sort of giving it its initial checkout before a few different repairs. So I'll give you just a brief outline of what I've done so far, what I plan to do, and we'll go ahead and see where we're at as far as functionality. So one thing I did first off is it had a broken fuse holder on the line cord, so I went ahead and replaced that. And a modern replacement fits perfectly. It's just great. So kind of my thinking with this is I want to keep it as original as possible. Definitely original as far as electrical values. You sort of have to do that. But I also want to keep the look of things original. So something I'm considering doing, I haven't really decided, is I want to replace these large paper caps. And so I've got modern replacements on the way, which are much smaller electrolytics. And I'm considering stuffing these with those modern replacements and then putting these back, but haven't decided. So anyway, replace that. I'm also planning on replacing the line cord itself, but for now, it's good enough to use. I would just like to have a modern cord in its place. For one thing, the plug up there, nothing is frayed or broken or anything like that. But the plug up there is an old, non-polarized, two-plug style, and it's missing the cover on front of the plug itself, so the wires are exposed, which I don't really like. Other than that, what I've done so far is remove all the tubes, plug it in, turn it on carefully while listening and observing anything odd, and just make sure that nothing smokes, which isn't necessarily the best way to do things, but I don't have a variac or a tube tester for that matter, so I'm a little bit limited on test equipment, but so far so good. That worked out. I put the tubes back in, and now what I'm doing is working through the manual on sort of the final connections that need to be made, and then the operating procedure for initial power up. So what they suggest is to remove the octal plug from the accessory socket, which was already missing. I'm going to have to order one of those. And they say to solder a U-shaped wire between pins 6 and 7 and then reinsert the plug. Unfortunately, since I don't have the plug, I can't do that. So what I'm going to do is just take one of my jumper leads, which is far too long and excessive, but if I can just very carefully attach this to pins 6 and 7 without interfering with anything else and without laying on ground, I'm going to call that okay. So on the back of our accessory plug, the pins are numbered, lucky enough. So we're just going to go ahead and connect pins 6 and 7, like so. It also, oh, by the way, I swung this capacitor out and added a jumper simply because my new fuse holder is a little bit longer and it doesn't fit. So with the new replacements, I'm going to sort of reposition these inwards. Luckily, there's tons of room under here to do different things, so we're okay for now. They also recommend what position each of the controls should be in before power up. So from memory, I don't have the manual in front of me, but from memory they want the filament gain off, which is just our on switch, as well as our audio gain after that point. So essentially your volume. You want to be in standby in whichever mode you're using. We're going to be using CW mode. Insert a crystal, and you want your band switch on the desired frequency. So we have a 40 meter crystal in there of unknown condition. We want to be on, I believe, the grid. We're going to tune the grid first. And then we want to be at what they're calling maximum, I think maximum capacitance on our capacitors, and that is actually to the left. So we're pointed to the left on our plate tune and our antenna load, and we're also pointed to the left on our oscillator tuning control. We have a key attached. We have a dummy load attached to the coax of the desired frequency, which is 10 to 80. We have our load down, which corresponds to the minimum impedance or low impedance antenna. If we were using like a ladder line or something with high impedance, we would flip that up. We're using a crystal versus VFO operation, and we have our accessory plug jumpered 6 and 7, I think it was. Yep. So we're going to see what happens. If anything goes crazy, we're going to immediately shut it off and unplug it. Obviously, when you're out of the cabinet like this is at your own risk. These are high voltages, so be very careful. I'm wearing safety glasses, and I'm not going to go sticking my fingers anywhere near here, and I'm just going to stay back, pay attention, and be cautious. So we're going to go ahead and turn the filament gain just until we hear a click and advance it no further and make sure nothing crazy happens. So far so good on the bottom side. Let's take a look top side, and I'm actually going to shut off the light and turn off the flash so that we can see if our tubes are glowing. It looks like our 6L6 down there is glowing. Our filament indicator light is glowing. We have our, what is that, our 5U4 also lit. And our transmit tube, our 6146, is also lit. So this is excellent so far. Things are looking really good. Moving on with the tune-up procedure. Our next step, one sec, I'll get the light on here. Our next step, and again, I don't have the manual. It's actually on my phone, which I'm filming with, so I'm somewhat doing this from memory, but next step is going to be to flip to transmit. So here we go. And our plate light lit up, which is a good thing. The filament light is lit. It's just really hard to see. I can prove it back here. You can see our two lights lit down there. And it's actually just not lined up very well. I'm going to turn this so that we can hopefully see our front panel a little better. It is lit. It's just not lined up real well with the jewel in the front panel. Okay, and now our next step, let's see if this thing modulates. So we want to close the key contacts and just watch our meter and see if anything happens. Here we go, just a quick tap. No. Which I'm not extremely surprised by. You wouldn't expect your first checkout of a radio without doing anything to be modulating. So let's try just a couple other things just in case. I'm going to go ahead and flip back to standby. I'm going to turn it off. And just in case we have a bad crystal, which I have no idea about, I've got a box full of crystals for this. Just in case, let's go ahead and switch to something different and see if there's any different results. We've got one in a box here, which you would think means it's maybe in better condition. I don't know, just a guess. This is on 80 meters, so that'll give us a chance to test a different band as well. A nice fuzz stuck to it. Let's go ahead and put that in. And we're going to switch our band switch to 80. This crystal is for 3672. Alright. bumped my key in the process. Let's give this a shot. So we're going to go back on. It's funny, they don't discuss a warm-up time in the manual. They just say flip it on and flip it to transmit, and then immediately close your key contacts. Okay, back to transmit. Let's see if we have any meter movement here. No, however, with this I do hear, listen to this. I do hear the transformer trying to do something. So just in case it's going to work, let's go ahead and move on to the next step. So what they want us to do, I'll try and center you guys on the meter here. What they want us to do is, while we close the key, advance our oscillator tune for the maximum grid current without exceeding 30 milliamps. I think is what it said. So let's give it a shot here. Oh my goodness. This thing modulates. Okay, let's move on to the next step in the tune-up. Okay, I misspoke. I said 30 milliamps. It's 3 milliamps. And then there's a note that suggests between 2 and 3 is satisfactory. So we're sitting at about 2.5. We're good with that. Next, we're going to switch our meter toggle switch to the final plate reading. And we're going to close the contacts and advance our final plate tune for a dip. And on 80 meters, this should occur at about 1 o'clock. So we're going to see what happens. Right now we're at the maximum, which is actually 9 o'clock. And we'll see if we achieve a dip at about 1 o'clock. Here we go. Not very much of a dip. There we go. I think I'm a little beyond where I want to be. I'm hearing some possible arcing back there. There we go. We'll call that a minimum for now. And we're going to move on to the next step. Okay, now we're ready to tune the antenna loading. And for that, we're going to close the contacts. And we want to advance this until a maximum plate reading is achieved of about 130 milliamps. So we don't want to go beyond 130 here. So here we go. There we go. This is one of those boing boing meters that you read about. Once all of that's done, according to the manual, we're going to go back to the plate tune and look for the dip. And then we're going to go back and forth between what are steps 16 and 17. If you're following along, we're going to peak our antenna load and dip, and peak our load and dip until we're right at about that 125 on our meter. Then finally, we're going to switch the meter back to grid, go back to our oscillator tuning, and make sure that we're not exceeding our 2 to 3 milliamps. And we're not. So at that point, we're ready to transmit on CW. So I'm impressed that we've made it this far. I'm going to go ahead and take this out to the shack. And because I've only got one antenna, we're just going to transmit through our dummy load, and we'll be receiving on our Kenwood TS820, and we'll see if this thing is getting out. So stay tuned. Thanks a lot for watching, and I can't wait to see you on the next video.